We are back.
We're back. We're talking about Erich von Däniken by popular demand. Sorry, actually, that's wrong in my notes. It actually says, please stop. It actually says, please stop talking about Erich von Däniken. That's, I don't know, that's weird. Should we do that or do we have to keep going?
I mean, this is the fun bit. First of all, It's Probably Not Aliens, a podcast where we debunk ancient astronaut theories, or in this case, astronaut theorists. We're doing sort of a mini biography of the Mac Daddy of ancient astronaut theory,
the history
Erich von Däniken.
daddy.
This is part 2, so you probably want to go to the episode before this and listen to part 1. I'm Tristan Johnson. I go down a non-Euclidean eldritch hole of and look into the unfathomable and emerge mentally destroyed, ready to talk about insane theories. But I have Scott to bring me back from the brink every week.
That's me. My name's Scott Nicewander. I know nothing really about anything, but I've been fascinated by learning the biography of this very mysterious, very charismatic.
His charisma score is off the charts.
This very charismatic, this very incredibly wrong man, and learning about his history and his life that inspired Ancient Aliens and therefore inspired this podcast that you're listening to right now.
Yeah. So today, how does one be wrong for 30 plus books?
How do we do it?
How does someone keep things fresh and get new ideas?
Yeah. Where does his inspiration come from?
Today, we're going to talk about how it might be that his ideas are not ones that he makes or researches, but that he takes from other authors without their permission and then writes books and then publishes books about it. Yeah.
Wait, so last episode we learned that Erich von Däniken has been a thief of physical things and monetary things. And I said monetary, weird. And now in this episode, we're learning that potentially he's a thief of thoughts, a thief of ideas.
Plagiarism, thought theft.
Thought theft. Thought theft is such a hard phrase to say.
He's been stealing people's thought fossils.
He sure has.
Yeah. So we did mention that he's not the first person to talk about ancient astronauts. That probably was a few years earlier with a book that came out from two people named Desmond Leslie and George Adamski, which was a book called The Flying Saucers Have Landed, which came out in 1953 and was pretty popular. Yeah, so George Adamski in this book claimed that he met a Venusian in the California desert in November of 1962.
A Venusian?
A Venusian, a Martian, but from Venus.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because we didn't quite know that Venus was a horrible hellscape of raining acid and molten lead. So there's this thought that underneath all the clouds is actually this like idyllic paradise at one point.
How to be incredibly wrong.
Yeah, it turned out to be literal hell. But another early author was a person by the name of Donald Kehoe, who was a major in the Marine Corps during World War II, developed an interest in flying saucers in 1949 after, all the, hullabaloo that kind of came up around Roswell. And wrote a book called Flying Saucers Are Real, which came out in 1950 and sold about 500,000 copies.
Honestly, a catchy title, though. Like in terms of like trying to get clicks, trying to get views, like on that YouTube mindset, like Flying Saucers Are Real. That's pretty. I mean, that's a fact. That's a statement.
Yeah, it's the most clickbait paperback book I've ever heard.
Like you would have to convince me that the cover of this book did not have just like a picture of like a grainy picture with like a big red arrow and or a big red circle and an arrow pointed at it, like clickbaity YouTube thumbnail.
And the hit titles of books continued. In 1953, he wrote a book called Flying Saucers from Outer Space.
Amazing.
And then that book was turned into a science fiction film called Earth versus the Flying Saucers.
Rad. Yeah, us versus them.
Which again, he thought was going to be a documentary, but turned out to be a science fiction movie.
Aw. Everyone's getting the rug pulled out from under them.
To the point where he actually tried to get his name removed from the credits of the movie. And then he also wrote a book called Flying Saucers, Top Secret.
Oh, that's good too.
And in that book, he talked about ancient astronauts.
So it's popping up. It's popping up way ahead of time.
Yeah. So it's probably not likely that von Däniken actually knew about these people. but he most definitely knew about some authors by the name of Louis Poel, Jacques Bergier, and Robert Charroux.
Okay. Couple of French-sounding folks, it sounds.
Yeah. So Poet and Bergier wrote a book called Le Matin des Magiciens in 1960, which translates to The Morning of the Magicians.
That's exciting.
It's apparently described as a rambling book that speculates about the existence of secret knowledge of the alchemists, mutant superhumans living in the present as the next stage of evolution, occult connections with Nazism, and atomic energy and extrasensory perceptions, as well as other similar topics.
You know, other stuff. Just a grab bag of fun ideas.
I don't know if you're like me who like trolls conspiracy media, but one of my favorite subgenre of YouTube videos are like 4-hour conspiracy theory epics where they just go through like every conspiracy, and it's just like openly plagiarized clips from like the History Channel and stuff like that, just all mashed together, or like various conspiracy theory videos, clips from History Channel documentaries, and all of it is just like, it's just a supercut of all those things, just covering every conspiracy theory that the guy who made it was into.
Oh, like you're talking about someone who genuinely believes in that, not like people, not people debunking stuff. You're talking about you like watching the people who are trying to convince you of it.
Yeah. I just find it amusing that these things where they just take clips from a bunch of documentaries, or like clips of other YouTube videos of conspiracy theory YouTubers, or just like conspiracy theory people at like talks and stuff like that, and just make like these 4-hour epics.
JFK was a mermaid. I don't know. I'm sure that's one of them.
Well, the thing is that the best thing about them is they don't have a coherent thesis. It just goes from like one thing to the next for like hours.
JFK was a mermaid and the color purple isn't real.
In that book, In the Morning of the Magicians, which is honestly pretty sweet title.
It is great.
Which came out in 1960. They talked about the existence of ancient super civilizations and ancient astronauts, which we also know that like ancient super civilizations was a thing that was in esoteric pseudo-archaeology before ancient astronauts. You know, we talked about this with like, you know, Atlantis and stuff, out of place artifacts and stuff like that. Very much with ties to Nazism. I don't know. I can't say anything about Bergier and Poel, but does seem kind of sus.
Yeah, a little bit.
So the thing is that many of the cases that von Däniken makes for ancient astronauts were discussed earlier by Poel and Bergier. For example, the Baghdad battery, which is...
Yeah, we've talked about that.
We haven't done a thing on it yet. It's sitting in my like for the next grab bag. I'm waiting for another quick thing to put in the grab bag. But talked about Easter Island, which we talked about.
We've done that.
So these are things that are talked about in Morning of the Magicians, by the way. They talk about the Nazca lines as airfield markers.
Yeah, we've definitely done that one. That's episode 3 for us.
Yeah, they talked about the Piri-Reis map.
We've done that. Wow.
As the product of an observation from a spaceship. And we haven't gotten to this one, but this one sounds super duper fun.
Okay.
That the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was done by an atomic bomb.
Oh, yeah. There's a bunch of like atomic bomb stuff in ancient astronaut like theory. I researched it a little bit in our video about that we did about the Eternals together on youtube.com if you want to watch that. Yeah, there's a lot of like ancient nuclear weapon stuff. Wild. We got to get to it.
That's great because I would love to read that because as a Dungeons and Dragons person, I write homebrew adventures, and my just deep fear of nuclear weapons comes out in basically every adventure I write. So that'll fit it. Also that place called the Ruins of Baalbek was a spaceship port. I don't even know how to even start with that one. I've never even heard of that one. Yeah, and so another book that came out before Erich von Däniken wrote Chariot of the Gods was by a guy named Robert Charroux, who wrote a book called 100,000 Years of Man's Unknown History, which came out in France as Histoire inconnue des hommes depuis 100 000 ans.
You're good at pronouncing those words.
It's a language I sort of speak. In that book, Charroux also says there are super civilizations that exist in the past and that knowledge has been suppressed and kept secret, and that great civilization and humanity were the result of us migrating to Earth from Venus.
It's always
they were
about
really
Venus.
On that at one point. Yeah,
they were really stuck on Venus for a little bit there, huh?
Yeah, and like Poel and Bergier, he talked about stuff that would show up in. He talked about the Piri-Reis map, the Gate of the Sun at Tiwanaku. and extraterrestrials visiting Earth, including the Baalbek spaceport and the atomic wars described in the Mahabharata.
Yeah.
So already these are things that conspicuously show up in Chariot of the Gods.
They sure do.
So when von Däniken went to go write Chariot of the Gods, which unlike these books came out in English and was very, very popular, he didn't really give much recognition to any of these authors.
He was familiar with their works and said, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take this little idea that you got right here, and it's going to be my idea now.
Yeah. These were extremely popular books, especially among people who had an interest in UFOs and stuff like that in France.
Yeah.
Not only as a Swiss person, it's very likely he speaks French, but these books were also translated into German in 1966 and 1970. So it's also fairly likely that he had read them in German, which we do know he speaks.
Yeah, and these were popular books. There's no way that no one noticed that he took these ideas. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, a Swiss person would have an easy time knowing about and reading a French book because Swiss people know an ungodly amount of languages. Europeans their language game is on a whole nother level.
I know. I barely know the one that I know.
Mm-hmm. There's also some other sources that I think are kind of amusing. Like one recent study dug up that it's very likely that some of his theories about ancient aliens come from H.P. Lovecraft horror stories. That in the 20s and 30s, H.P. Lovecraft wrote some stuff about primeval aliens visiting Earth and creating life, which might have inspired von Däniken.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about that one before on the show about aliens coming and basically creating humanity.
Yeah, and that's H.P. Lovecraft. Like, that's not even pretending to be real. That is straight up fiction.
Taking something that's fictional and being like, but what if it was real? What if I pass it off as real, though?
Well, that's one of the, some of the better H.P. Lovecraft books are sort of they're like personal journals and stuff like that. So they're sort of there's that whole Lovecraftian mythos that sort of feel that's like the best H.P. Lovecraft work is actually feeling like it's part of a real world, but then being like, no, it's actually real is
Well, you know what's weird? So this plays into the Anunnaki a little bit too, right? Of aliens coming and creating life on Earth or something. And what's really interesting about that is obviously that has ties to Scooby-Doo. I say obviously. I know it has ties to Scooby-Doo because in the Scooby-Doo canon.
With its ties to conspiracy theories, Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, Scooby-Doo, because obviously in the Scooby-Doo canon, as we all know, Scooby-Doo is a descendant of the Anunnaki. That is real. That's not a thing I made up. So, but what's interesting about that is that whole show that uses that idea, which is Mystery Incorporated.
The dog mystery show.
Yeah, the dog mystery show. Well, the specific one called Mystery Incorporated, it ends with a very Lovecraftian horror sort of showdown between the Scooby Gang and this big tentacled monster, celestial monster, and it's just
God.
And yeah, it's just okay, so there's a lot of ties here. Everything's tying together in a really, really, really interesting way that I'm starting to connect the dots on. Scooby-Doo's wild, everyone. If you gave up on Scooby-Doo when you were a kid, get back into it. It is bonkers.
Yeah, I don't think I have seen anything other than the 60s show and one of the movies.
Yeah, wow. It's all good.
So Chariot of the Gods got really popular.
Yeah, it did.
It's so popular that it wound up in front of the eyes of Mr. Charoux. And he went to his publishers and had some words to say. The word plagiarism and threats of lawsuits started to come up. To prevent from being sued, von Däniken then, in later editions, added the book to the bibliography of Chariot of the Gods, but apparently didn't properly alphabetize it, which makes me, I don't know for sure, but it makes me think that it's it was just taped onto the end of the bibliography when they just did another printing.
He was trying to bury it. He was and also this thing as well is on here. It doesn't really matter.
Let me see if I can.
You're looking in your book?
Looking at my copy of Chariot of the Gods right now. Okay. Not surprisingly, the bibliography is very short. Real history. The bibliography is a total of two spreads.
Jeez, friends.
Which I gotta say, friends, as a person who has read a lot of academic history, the bibliography is typically like half the page count.
That is so funny.
Charroux right here. Charroux, Robert. Actually, it is done properly. L'histoire continue des hommes depuis sa maison. Yeah, it's right here.
Okay.
So let's see what year this thing I got off eBay from.
Let's see if this was a reprint.
It's from 1970s. It's the second printing.
It's the second printing. Look at that. We checked our we did better than Erich von Däniken. We checked our sources.
Yeah, because it just happened to be on my desk. In Gods from Outer Space, von Däniken also mentioned Poel, Belgier, and Charroux were working on similar questions about the past. So he acknowledged that he didn't just, he wasn't the person who thought this all up first. The only thing that he fails to mention in that book is that they were working on those questions before he was. So he kind of talked like, we are all working on this together. And it's like, no, they worked on it. And then you took their work.
No. Hey, we're all trying to figure it all out here. Like you come into it like several years late. Yeah, we're all equally trying to figure this out. No, my guy.
Yeah, and later on, Rogersdorf, the person who significantly rewrote Chariot of the Gods, later became basically his ghostwriter. That's how you write 11 books in 11 years, by the way.
Oh, that's it. Hire a dead writer.
Yeah,
I don't know what a ghostwriter is.
You don't know what a ghostwriter is?
Spirit of Vengeance, Marvel, something like that. No, I'm kidding. I know what a ghostwriter is.
Okay.
I'm playing dumb. It's my role on this show.
It's funny because I have that same joke with my wife, but she talks about there's apparently some TV show called Ghostwriter, like Ghostwriter, WRITER. That's about, I guess, a ghost that writes. So I'm like, okay, I did not know that particular set of phonemes just has so many different representations.
It's got a lot of stuff.
This is another Nicolas Cage connection to this podcast.
That's right. Nicolas Cage, Ghostwriter. We got to get him on the show.
I want to learn more because apparently on Ghostwriter he did some weird stuff. Like he bought like a witch doctor or what he thought was a witch doctor mask. A witch doctor is like a priest of a legitimate religion. But he bought a mask and did a whole bunch of he's apparently a very strange actor. His method is very much his own.
He's on the upswing. I'm rooting for him.
Yeah, he's sort of coming around. That Pig movie apparently was really good. Do you know about this movie?
I know that it exists. I don't know anything about it.
Apparently it's really good, and it's a movie. It sounds like what it is from my getting little bits of it is. Imagine, that movie where Qui-Gon Jinn is looking for his daughter from human traffickers or whatever.
Taken? It's like Taken, but with a pig?
It's like Taken, but with a truffle hunter searching for people who stole his truffle hunting pig.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that, actually. Now I got to watch it.
Yeah. Apparently, in the preface to a book called Gods from Outer Space, Rogersdorf points out that von Däniken was not the first to write about ancient astronauts, but that his questions were, I love this. This is the most defensive thing I've ever heard. While he's not the first, he is more impartial, more direct, and more audacious. And also conspicuously didn't mention who was first.
Yeah, come on. That's just so, it's so gross. I mean, look, all of this is bad. I'm not being credit the originals. I'm maybe you should all go away.
Yeah. And von Däniken also, he has, he probably learned about the Piri-Reis map from these people and all these various things that he has, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to do the research himself for any of these things. And it's okay, yeah. Turns out that he borrowed without attribution quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, he also spawned his own, breed of people who've ripped off him.
That's true.
I'm thinking of our Anunnaki guy. I'm trying to remember his name right off the top of my head.
Scooby-Doo.
Zechariah Sitchin was sort of following up on that whole thing.
That's true. And now look where we are. We're just copying Erich von Däniken.
Well, needless to say, von Däniken and his books have brought out many debunkers over the years. Like us. Like us.
Look at us. We're doing it. Well, more like you. Not really me. I did a couple episodes, I guess.
Yeah. You've got your challenge coin.
I did it.
And to kind of like put a bow on his like on the things, like he's made some claims about like Easter Island, for example, that have been verified to not be true. And
That's a really weird way to phrase that. Verified to be false.
we have found specific evidence that debunks things that he said were true.
Absolutely.
And also, a reading of his stuff would show that he makes very big mistakes with like basic facts, which show a sign of somebody who is not a careful researcher.
No. I mean, I agree with the quote above where you said they described von Däniken as audacious. I would agree with that part of it, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say that he's a very rigorous researcher.
Yeah, so I guess the next part to talk about is like the impact that von Däniken has had on discourse.
Well, yeah, and this is really exciting because we've gone through this whole thing, and it's a very different kind of episode for us, a very different kind of biography sort of thing. So I'm glad that there's not a part in this episode where Tristan makes us sad. You know what I mean? Like that's my favorite part so far, is that there's no really sad part, right?
Well,
No.
so
Tristan.
the UFO phenomenon's been going basically since 1947. You can tie it either to Roswell or the Mount Rainier flying saucer event sightings. But again, there was a time when there were skeptics who were worried about a decline in interest in real science because of people like von Däniken and those named by name, that they would take over our public imagination of the past. His work has been translated now into 32 different languages, and he was able to tap into our milieu, and now it's everywhere. Like, this is the guy who inspired the Eternals. This is the person who inspired, like,
Yeah.
I'm sure that you can think that in our like kind of cultural milieu, right? Like,
Yeah.
that the ancient astronaut theory is now like definitely part of our mental space.
100%. I mean, like even before, when I don't know about you, Tristan, but when I talk about this podcast with other people, because I'm a guy, so obviously I have a podcast. So everyone's like, "What's your podcast about?"
You're a white guy. What's your podcast?
Yeah, we all have. Every white guy has access to microphones and therefore has no concept of not being recorded. We always have to record ourselves and make a podcast about it. That is what we live for. So everyone's always asking each other, "Hey, what's your podcast? What's your podcast? Nice to meet you. What's your podcast?" And every time I talk about this show, I don't even have to explain it to people. I say like, "Oh yeah, we debunk ancient astronaut claims." Sometimes like ancient aliens is more gets people, but ancient astronaut is sort of like, "Huh, what's that?" But like, "Oh yeah, we debunk like the History Channel show Ancient Aliens." And people are like, "Oh, yeah, I immediately know what that is." And some people are really into it. Some people are really like, "I don't know. I think those guys are onto something. I don't know." I'm like, well, listen to this show, maybe.
I think there's a lot of people who don't necessarily believe, like for me and a lot of conspiracy theory media is like, I don't believe it. It's just fun to like, it's just fun to listen to. Although now I'm like, as I do more research, because I'm like researching this like conspiracy area. And at the same time, I've been like for almost 2 years now doing a like long form video series where I investigate like the world of the American far right and like how the conspiracy theory is built up around that. And I'm like halfway between like sometimes this is funny and sometimes it's terrifying. But which I think speaks a lot to because like I'm just trying to find answers about where conspiracy theories fit in our world today. But yeah, like not only has von Däniken made crap tons of money off of this, but he has inspired lots of people who have either gone on to make their own thing like Zecharia Sitchin or have just blatantly copied his work and just do the exact same grift in other places to great success. Most of them, did not do well, but some of them have. And to this day, like I said, is von Däniken's most recent book came out last year. It came out, I don't know, well, I can't say that he's made a book since this podcast has started, but I'm sure it's just a matter of time.
And then we'll review it will review it for you all and tell you all the things he got right.
You're just committing me to read a book.
No, I don't want to read a book. That's why I make a podcast.
On that thing about like white guys in podcasts, I just think about that line from The Simpsons where it's like Lisa's like, I hate being young, no one listens to you. And then Grandpa's like, I hate being old, no one listens to you. And Homer walks in like, I'm a white male between the ages of 25 and 35, and everyone listens to me, no matter how dumb my suggestions are.
That's us. But hopefully we try to provide, good infotainment, as they say. Mm-hmm.
So to kind of put a bow on it, Erich von Däniken is a person who spreads misinformation and pseudo-archaeology and has made a lot of money and has made it very popular and has inspired more people to do the same thing. We tend to, and this is my bugbear, we tend to realize how damaging that is in the context of pseudoscience and in our age of talking about pseudoscience and the proliferation of conspiracy theories and misinformation in our kind of current day. We're kind of taking that seriously, but I'm always troubled by how we don't really do that as seriously when talking about archaeology and history, even though in our episode on Pumapunku, we've talked about how it can have serious effects on people's lives and our understanding of things. And so I think that we should, that it's something that we should take seriously. And Erich von Däniken has probably done more to popularize stuff that, as I've even mentioned, has veered into neo-Nazi stuff. And I didn't even get into all of the racist shit that von Däniken has said in his long, illustrious career.
Yeah. Do you want to rattle some off really quickly to flesh out this episode?
I don't have any examples on the top of my head except for the fact that he has some not so nice things to say about black people. And it does imagine that all of the people who he claims could not have, been inspired to do big things all tend to be people of color, which is very conspicuous.
Yeah.
So
can I hit on that really quickly, actually?
Sure.
So just to sort of flesh out this second episode, because I think I am going to split it up, but I just want to hit on this really quickly. We did a video on YouTube about Marvel's Eternals and how it was inspired by Erich von Däniken and Chariot of the Gods and things like that. Very blatantly inspired. Issue 2 of Eternals has literally says Chariots of the Gods on it. I was reading some of the comments on that video. We had mentioned this thing that we've mentioned before on this podcast, which is that if a culture or civilization was not white, if it was any big achievement by a non-white society, then by Erich von Däniken's standards and a lot of ancient astronaut people's standards, it must have been aliens. It had to have been aliens who built the pyramids. It had to be aliens who did, the Easter Island heads. Anything, but if it's something like what was the example that you used for the Parthenon or something? I can't remember.
Yeah, the Parthenon. Sometimes they make or the Roman Colosseum.
Yeah.
No one ever said the Romans couldn't have possibly built the Colosseum.
Yeah, and so there were comments about us saying that were basically well, the reason why we don't make those claims about something like Parthenon is because we have more, or the Colosseum is because we have more information about those and the history of those. And so we don't have to, unlike these other things like the pyramids or whatever, where the history is sort of muddied there. And so people were trying really hard to make that argument to be well, it's because we don't have a lot of that same information for these other, non-white cultures, that we have to guess how their achievements were made. And it's such a wild thing to make that argument, because why would you default to saying that it was aliens then?
Yeah, that's quite a stretch to go to.
Why you are bending over backwards? You are pulling so many muscles, making this stretch to say that just because we don't have this clear-cut information about how these monuments and how these cultures and how these landmarks were made, that it definitely wasn't the people in those cultures. It had to have been alien. And like, to default to aliens is such a wild thing to genuinely sit back and say, that makes sense to me. That's why we do it to, you know, the pyramids and not the Colosseum. It's like that. No, it's still wrong.
And like also just completely spits in the face of the many, many smart people who've dedicated their lives to answering these questions in like real in depth. Like one of the things I think a listener showed us this today, that like this archaeological project went through where they were showing we made a joke about how move Big Rock, right? And that there was this experiment that was going on in Egypt where they moved Big Rock. They were able to recreate the way that they moved the rocks in the way that they would have done to get the Great Pyramids of Giza. And with like a fraction of the people, they were able to move some really large stones. And like, if you just had like 100 people, you could like move so many stones.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh yeah, you figured it out. And like, yeah, like the whole thing of how we discovered about the sort of like shuffling of the you know, the moai on Easter Island. Mm-hmm. Like we figured that out. And it's like, yeah, it turns out that, you know, you give people a lot of time, like they'll figure out some pretty ingenious stuff. And there are, you know, archaeologists are, because like a lot of the times that like when you're kind of talking about, it's either they were not a civilization that had writing, right, or their civilization was destroyed so long ago that their writing doesn't persist to today,
right,
or it was, you know, destroyed through one reason or another. Which also we should be sensitive to as people of European ancestry, because the only reason why we know the Parthenon and like the reason that we know a lot about like ancient Greece and stuff like that is not because we were so forward thinking that we preserved it all. I'll tell y'all, Plato's Republic as we know it today was not translated from Greek. we have the what's it called? We have the House of Wisdom in Baghdad to thank for that. So like, yeah, like it's, I mean, like this is like the central serious bit that we're always going to be digging through on this podcast as we sort of come week by week, because it is the central like reason why not only is ancient astronaut theory like wrong, but it is like it intentionally like it promotes a like racist idea of the past. And this is the legacy of Erich von Däniken's decades of work.
This is what he did. And it doesn't matter how many videos of people in modern day showing that you can build the pyramids or showing that you can you can walk the moai, you know, it doesn't matter how many of those exist, because Erich von Däniken's work is so ingrained in culture that there's always going to be a subset of people now who go, I don't know. I really don't think you could I really don't think people could have done that. And even it doesn't matter how many researchers and historians and how many people show that all these ancient civilizations were genuinely so rad and cool, because Erich von Däniken ruined it.
And I mean, also not off the hook is that the History Channel's now been leveraging it to make a whole lot of money as well, which,
constantly.
You know, I expect this from a weird old man, but like the History Channel, I mean, I know the History Channel has declined in the like, you know, last like 20 years or so, but
right.
It's still like that's a low that I still think is a bit beyond the pale.
Yeah, which is why we are the History Channel now. We are the History Podcast. We're doing it.
Come back for our long form response to Pawn Stars. That's History Channel.
Anyway, that was sort of a long tangent. I wanted to make this into 2 episodes, and we needed to sort of fill out the second episode a little bit better, I think. But I'm honestly glad we sort of had that conversation and sort of talked about where Erich von Däniken's work sort of led society, led culture, led us right now. And
I'll make up for it when we do the David Icke episode, because I'm going to talk so much about Nazis in that episode, and I'm going to go on a big rant about that all the Anunnaki stuff is anti-Semitism. All of it.
Oh, dang it, Scooby. No, not you.
Not Scooby.
Not Scooby. Well, until that episode, please continue listening and continue following this show. It's Probably Not Aliens. We don't say that enough. This show is called It's Probably Not Aliens. You can follow us at Probs Not Aliens on Twitter. Let us know if you like this two-parter. And our little rant here at the end of this one. Tristan, where can people find more of you and your work?
I have a YouTube channel called Step Back History where I talk about the past and the present and how things connected. And my next video coming up soon, which, if it's not out by the time this episode airs, I have something very bad has happened to me.
Oh, no.
But it is the next and penultimate video in the series that I was talking about the American far right. And it's about the Oklahoma City bombing. So if that interests you, check it out. But Scott, you have a wonderful YouTube channel as well.
So you claim. My YouTube channel is called Nerdsync, Nerdsync, all one word. I don't say that enough. I make video essays about nerdy things, cartoons, comics, Scooby-Doo, as you probably have picked up on. Right now, I'm in the process of making videos about whatever happened to thought balloons in comic books. Why aren't they as present today as they were in the past? And I also just thought of an idea to make a video about comic books that became memes. So if you want educational stuff, Tristan's the better follow. If you just want fun.
I'm not going to let you do that self-deprecation on my watch.
All right.
You, what's it called? Especially when you get in the weeds on the early days and the sort of drama and business behind the comic books. I don't think there's anyone doing that better than you.
Well, thank you. Please leave reviews of the show on Apple Podcasts. I know you can also rate it on Spotify. Thank you to everyone who's been doing that. Thank you to everyone who's been doing 5 stars. I know that some people still are doing the meme about 4 stars. That's my fault. 5-star reviews really does help us out, gets us in the iTunes charts, but really that is not the best way for us to grow. What is the best way for us to grow, Tristan?
Putting this podcast on USB keys and throwing them at your friends or enemies. Or really just anyone. But yeah, the thing is that podcasts don't really work like YouTube. They don't have recommendation algorithms. It's really word of mouth. So put word in mouth.
Oh, but we are on YouTube now, though.
Yeah, we are on YouTube now. Yeah, we're getting caught up. But if you want to watch this, It's Probably Not Aliens is now on YouTube.
Fantastic.
Where the first 2 comments we received were Wreck Me, History Daddy, and
Words of Thought Fossils.
Words of Thought Fossils.
Yep, so there we go. Good
memes. Good start.
And if you want to tell your friends about it, the best way to do it, just send them to probsnotaliens.com. It's got links to all of the different places you can listen to this show. And that's really it. We made it real simple for you. There's no excuses now. Go do it. Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate it. Take us out of here, Tristan.
Well, we'll be back next time. But until then, the truth is out there. Probably.
We did it. We recorded 2 episodes in one session. One session. One session. One session. One session.